"Not tonight," she said again, eyes on her screen instead of me. That was the night I stopped asking. People think marriages end with screaming, but mine started ending in whispers. The soft kind that slide across a bedroom and land like a hand on a hot stove, quick, sharp, teaching you not to reach there again. We'd had rough patches before. Two working people always do. But there's a difference between seasons and forecasts. A dry week is weather. Years without rain means you're living in a desert and calling it home. My name is Daniel. I'm 38. The kind of man who keeps lists and fixes squeaky hinges before anyone else notices they squeak. I run operations for a small logistics company. Trucks, schedules, people who need someone steady at the center. My wife, Tessa, is 35 and brilliant in a way that makes rooms pay attention. She works in marketing and can sell you a chair without letting you sit down first. We've been married 9 years. No kids. Not because we didn't talk about it, but because every time we tried to talk about it, the conversation drifted into fog and never came back. The night I stopped asking looked like any other. The house was tidy because I'd made it that way. Dishes dried in the rack, counters wiped down to a quiet shine, towels folded over the oven handle in straight lines that meant I still believed in order. The TV was on but muted. Her phone wasn't muted. It never is when I'm around. The blue glow on her face made her look like a person who lived in a different time zone. I reached out the way I've learned to do, careful, testing, as if my own wife might spook like a deer. My hand rested on her hip, not grabbing, not pleading, just a question phrased in skin instead of words. I could feel the warmth of her through the cotton of her pajama shorts. For a second, I thought maybe that warmth meant something. Then her body stiffened, exactly the way it always does before the rebuff. She didn't look over. She didn't pause whatever reel or message or article had her smiling in that small, private way she no longer uses on me. "Not tonight," she said, mechanical, the syllables filed smooth over months of practice. It used to come wrapped in softness. It used to sound like, "I'm tired, babe," followed by a kiss on the forehead and the promise of tomorrow. But the kiss disappeared. Then the promise. Then even the babe. Now it was just a phrase delivered to the air, as if she were declining a calendar invite. I pulled my hand back, and it felt like I was retrieving it from a closing elevator door. No injury, just the knowledge I had nearly gotten caught somewhere I shouldn't be. I lay on my side, face to the wall, and listened to her scroll. There is a rhythm to modern rejection. The soft pad of a finger, the tiny elastic ping of a new message, the chuckle caught in the throat. If love has a soundtrack, so does indifference. I stared at the paint, eggshell, 2 coats I'd rolled myself last spring, and wondered how many times a man can be told, "not tonight," before the words stop hurting and start hardening. I tried to calculate it like I do shipments. How many nights over how many months equals 1,000? The number doesn't really matter. What matters is the taste you get in your mouth when you finally realize you've been rationed. It's metallic, like chewing a coin. I thought about all the things I had tried to tilt the scale back toward us. Weekend trips, she said, were too much logistics for how little time we had. Massages in the living room that made her check her phone mid-shoulder blade. Dinners at places she used to adore. She'd photograph the food and tell me we should come back with the team. Flowers that felt like apologies I hadn't earned the right to give. I'd been pouring water into a vase with a crack, then blaming myself each time the level dropped. The worst part was that I never asked for fireworks. I'm not 22. I don't need passion to burn down the house. I just wanted a hand to find mine in the dark and stay there. A kiss on a Tuesday that didn't come with an asterisk. Wanting to be wanted is not a luxury. It's a pulse. Behind me, Tessa coughed lightly, the kind of noise that means nothing and still says everything. She angled her body away, and the mattress shifted. You learn a lot about someone from the way they turn their back. There's the tired turn, soft, apologetic, leaving a bridge behind. And there's the border turn, final, straight-backed, like closing a gate. Tonight was a gate. My brain did what it always does when the heart gets loud. It made a plan. Not a revenge plan, not some petty ledger of withholdings to even the score. A simple plan, with 2 lines. 1. Stop asking to be hurt. 2. Stop doing the things that make it easy for her to forget you're human. That's all. Nothing cinematic. Pain taught in small lessons requires small corrections. If reaching gets me burned, I won't reach. If I'm a lamp she only notices when it's dark, I'll stop changing the bulb for a while and see if she learns the room by moonlight. Minutes clicked by. The heat kicked on. Somewhere outside, a late train moved through the city like a long exhale. I couldn't sleep, but I didn't toss. Stillness felt like respect for once, respect for myself. Around 1 a.m., she set her phone on the nightstand face down, a habit that had arrived quietly and then refused to leave. The glass met wood with a tidy tap that sounded exactly like an answer to a question I hadn't asked out loud. I realized, lying there, that I had been counting score wrong. I was counting nights without intimacy. I should have been counting nights without kindness. The numbers weren't the same. When morning slid through the blinds and painted the wall in pale stripes, I was still awake. Tessa breathed slow and even, hair fanned on her pillow, beautiful in a way that my chest ached and my mind feel old. I used to watch her sleep and think about all the things I'd do to make her day easier. Coffee waiting, car warmed, her jacket set by the door. The 1000th rejection taught me something new. The man who does everything becomes invisible to the person who expects it. I sat up, careful not to shake the mattress, and planted my feet on the floor like a man arriving somewhere. The plan wasn't loud, but it was real. Today, I wouldn't ask. And for the first time in a long time, I wouldn't cushion her world at the cost of my own. I padded to the kitchen without making coffee for 2. I didn't cue up her podcast on the speaker, or refill the oat milk she likes, or leave the sticky note reminders she started pretending were for her benefit and not for mine. I just stood at the window with my plain mug and watched the street wake up. A jogger with a reflective vest, a delivery van idling at the curb. The ordinary hum of a city full of people who got up this morning intending to be seen. Behind me, somewhere down the hallway, her alarm started chirping. I took one more drink, set the mug in the sink, and let the sound of it ring in the quiet like a small bell. Not tonight had finally become not anymore. The first week after that 1000th rejection was the hardest, because I was still holding on to the idea that maybe it was just stress. Maybe her mind was at work, or maybe it was the endless cycle of chores, bills, and grown-up responsibilities weighing her down. I wanted to believe those excuses. I clung to them like a man gripping a rope in quicksand. But one night, while I sat in bed and staring at the ceiling, I heard her soft laugh in the dark. A laugh not meant for me. The glow of her phone lit up her face, and I could see her cheeks pull into a smile that hadn't been directed at me in years. I turned my head slightly, pretending to roll over in my sleep, but my eyes stayed on her. That grin was sharp, private, and it pierced me deeper than all the not tonights put together. It wasn't the laugh itself, it was how genuine it looked. The same sparkle she used to have when she'd talk to me late into the night about silly dreams and half-formed plans. The sparkle I thought was gone, but clearly it wasn't. It had just shifted away from me. I felt like I'd walked into a room I didn't belong in anymore. She typed quickly, fingers flying across the screen, giggling under her breath, and I wondered how many hours she had given away like this. Hours I thought were hours. I didn't ask. I didn't accuse. I didn't even shift in bed. I just lay there, chest tight, letting the sound of her private amusement drill into me. It was the moment I knew things weren't just slipping. they had already slipped. And for the first time, instead of asking myself how I could fix it, I wondered why I was the only one still trying. When I look back, it feels almost embarrassing how much of myself I poured into that marriage. I was the type of husband who noticed things: her favorite brand of coffee, the way she liked her towels folded, how she always needed an extra blanket no matter how hot it was outside. I thought paying attention was love. I thought giving endlessly was the secret to keeping someone happy. But what happens when you give and the other person just takes? You start to vanish. For years, I convinced myself that her silence meant comfort, that when she came home and went straight to her phone, it was because she trusted I would take care of everything else. Dinner, the trash, the leaking faucet, the credit card bill, it all landed on my shoulders without complaint. And I carried it, proud even, because that's what I believed a husband was supposed to do. But silence has a weight. It presses down on you in ways you don't notice at first. One day, you're making her favorite pasta, and she doesn't even look up to say thanks. Another day, you're fixing the shelf she asked for, and she walks past it like it doesn't exist. A week later, you realize the only time your name comes out of her mouth is when she needs something. And the worst part? I let it happen. I built that pattern. I trained her, in a way, to believe I would always bend and never break, that my needs were optional. At night, lying in that bed beside her while she scrolled with that secret smile, I finally faced it. Love without reciprocity isn't love. It's servitude. The silence between us wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a message, a cold, constant reminder that, in her eyes, I had become background noise, the hum of an appliance she no longer noticed, but would miss only if it stopped working. And deep down, something in me was starting to shut off. It crept up on me slowly, the way fog rolls in until you realize you can't see your own hand in front of your face. That's how invisibility feels in a marriage. You don't notice it at first. One day, you're cracking a joke at the dinner table, and she barely reacts. The next, you're talking about something important at work, and her eyes glaze over like she's already somewhere else. Then, before you know it, you've disappeared in your own home. I became the guy who kept the lights on, the fridge stocked, the yard trimmed. My presence was useful, not cherished. If I was there, things got done. If I wasn't, they piled up. But me, the man she married, the man with thoughts, fears, dreams, that man was gone in her eyes. I tried to test it once. I came home quiet, deliberately late, skipped dinner, sat in the dark on the porch with a beer, just to see if she'd notice. Hours passed. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't open the door to check. When I finally went inside, she looked up briefly from her phone and said, "Oh, you're home," as if I'd been out picking up milk instead of sitting 15 feet away, wondering if my existence mattered at all. The realization stung worse than I could admit. I had become invisible not just to her, but to myself. I stopped seeing the man I once was. I used to be someone who laughed loudly, who had friends over, who planned weekend trips, who felt alive. Now, I was a ghost that moved through the house, performing duties without recognition, swallowing loneliness one silent evening at a time. And invisibility does something dangerous to a man. It makes him forget his worth. That night, sitting on the porch again, I told myself a truth I had avoided for years. If I kept fading, one day I wouldn't just be invisible to her, I'd be invisible to me. And that was the beginning of the end. Once I admitted to myself that I was invisible, the anger came. Not fiery, screaming anger, the quiet kind that simmers in your gut until it turns into resolve. I realized I couldn't keep begging for scraps of attention like a starving dog. If she couldn't see me anymore, then I needed to stop making myself so available. So I started planning my withdrawal. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no ultimatums, just little choices that chipped away at the habits I had built for her comfort. I stopped rushing to fold her laundry. If it sat in the dryer for a day, so be it. I stopped asking what she wanted for dinner and started cooking only for myself. When she asked me to run errands, sometimes I forgot. When she brushed me off with another "not tonight," I didn't plead or pout. I simply rolled over and went to sleep without a word. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel desperate. It was strange, almost liberating, like loosening a tie that had been strangling me without realizing it. She had made me invisible, but now I was choosing where to direct my energy. I spent longer at the gym. I called up old friends. I lingered at work instead of racing home to be ignored. I wasn't leaving her yet, but I was leaving behind the version of myself who tolerated the void. She didn't notice at first, or maybe she thought it was temporary, a sulk I would snap out of. But as the days stretched on, I caught her giving me sideways glances, like she could sense something shifting but couldn't quite put her finger on it. And she was right. Something was shifting. For years, I had been orbiting around her, giving everything I had, asking for nothing. But I finally realized if I kept revolving around someone who didn't see me, I'd never find my own center again. So I started to pull away, step by step, and the silence that once suffocated me began to feel like space I could finally breathe in. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about the day, just another weekday morning with the alarm blaring too early, the smell of stale coffee in the pot, and the faint sound of her shower running upstairs. But something inside me clicked. Normally, mornings were her stage. She'd shuffle into the kitchen, half-dressed, drop her mug in front of me and mutter, "Coffee," like I was her personal barista. I'd oblige, of course, every time. Sometimes she'd add in a half-hearted thanks, most times not. That morning, though, I decided I wouldn't move. I sat at the table, scrolling through my phone, sipping my own cup. When she came down, hair damp, eyes on her phone, she slid the mug toward me as usual without even looking up, a reflex like tossing scraps to a dog. But I didn't budge. I didn't reach for the pot. I didn't even look at her. I just took another sip of my own coffee and kept scrolling. For a long moment, there was silence. Not the usual background silence we'd been living in, but a sharp, cutting silence that demanded attention. Eventually, she glanced up, confusion flickering across her face. No coffee?" she asked, like I'd just broken some sacred routine. I shrugged. "There's a pot right there." Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. She poured her own coffee, slower than necessary, shooting me little side eyes like she couldn't decide if this was a joke or an insult. And here's the thing, it felt good. Not cruel, not petty, just balanced. For once, I wasn't the automatic giver. I wasn't invisible. By withholding that tiny act, I reminded myself that I was still in control of me. She didn't say a word after that. She grabbed her bag, muttered something under her breath, and left for work. But I knew she felt it, the absence, the shift. And as I sat there alone in the quiet kitchen finishing my coffee, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The thing about routines is that people build their whole sense of control around them. For years, she had relied on me to fill the gaps, make the coffee, handle the chores, be the one who smoothed over the rough edges of daily life. When I stopped, even in small ways, it unsettled her. At first, she acted like nothing had changed. A couple of mornings passed where she huffed and poured her own coffee, stomping around like I'd just committed a crime. She didn't complain outright, maybe pride kept her quiet, but her energy shifted. She lingered in the kitchen longer, waiting for me to acknowledge her, to fold back into the role I'd always played. But I didn't.
And that's when I saw it, the shock of being unseen. It started with her little attempts at reclaiming attention. She'd suddenly ask how my day was after years of brushing off my stories. She'd poke her head into the garage while I was fixing something, pretending to care. She even tried to slide closer to me on the couch at night, like maybe I'd automatically wrap an arm around her the way I used to. But my responses were minimal, careful, intentional. A short answer, a polite nod. No bitterness, no begging, just distance. One evening, she finally snapped. "You're different," she said, eyes narrowing at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "You're cold." I remember looking at her and realizing she genuinely didn't understand. After years of dismissing me, of treating my needs like inconveniences, the idea that I could detach, that I could stop caring, was inconceivable to her. She wasn't shocked at what she'd done to me. She was shocked that I wasn't falling in line anymore. That night, lying in bed, I turned to the far side without a word. I didn't need to say it out loud. She already knew. The man who once begged for her attention was gone. And for the first time in our marriage, she was the one reaching into the silence and finding nothing there. It's strange how quickly a marriage can unravel once the smallest threads are pulled. What started with me refusing to pour a cup of coffee began to spread, slowly but relentlessly, into every corner of our life together. The old routines, those tired little rituals we'd fallen into, began to collapse. I stopped asking what she wanted for dinner. Instead, I cooked what I wanted or picked something up on the way home. Sometimes I'd eat before she even got back. The first time she came into the kitchen and saw an empty plate in the sink, her eyes widened. She didn't say a word, but the silence that followed was thick. She had been so used to me catering to her tastes that the absence of it felt almost like an insult. I stopped waiting up for her at night. For years, I'd kept the TV on low, scrolling my phone until she finished whatever endless scrolling or texting kept her up. But now, I turned off the lights, went to bed, and left her to wander in alone. The look on her face the first night she crawled into a dark, silent bedroom was almost comical. Half irritation, half disbelief. Even the smallest gestures disappeared. No more grabbing her favorite snack at the grocery store. No more automatically filling her gas tank when I borrowed her car. No more good morning texts during the day. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't outwardly mean. I was simply absent in all the ways she had taken for granted. And she noticed. I could feel it in the way she hovered around me more, testing if I'd break the silence. The way she lingered in doorways, waiting for me to initiate conversation. The way her voice pitched slightly higher, almost forced, when she asked about my day. She was unsettled, and though she didn't admit it, I knew she felt the foundation shifting beneath her. For years, she had assumed I'd always be there, reliable, forgiving, invisible. But when I stopped playing the part, she realized something she hadn't considered before. She had no idea how to hold this marriage together without me doing all the work. And for once, it wasn't my problem to fix. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of lazy day that used to be filled with small talk and background noise. I was in the garage, sorting through old boxes, not really looking for anything, just enjoying the quiet. She appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, an edge in her voice. "What's going on with you?" I didn't look up right away. I set down a box, wiped the dust from my hands, and finally met her eyes. "What do you mean?" "You've been distant, different. You don't talk to me anymore. You don't—" Her words trailed off, but I knew what she meant. I didn't orbit her anymore. I almost laughed at the irony. Years of her brushing me off, rolling her eyes at my attempts at closeness, and now she was the one demanding answers. Instead, I kept my tone calm.
I just stopped trying so hard. That threw her. Her face flickered. Confusion, then defensiveness. So this is payback? You're punishing me? I shook my head. No, it's not punishment. It's just me finally seeing things for what they are. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. For a moment, she stood there, shifting uncomfortably, like she had walked into a fight she hadn't prepared for. She had expected me to crumble, to beg, to demand her affection. Instead, I was steady, detached. The silence stretched, heavy between us. I could tell she wanted to snap back, but she couldn't, because deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't sudden. It was years in the making. Every not tonight, every dismissive shrug, every night spent staring at her phone instead of at me, it had all led here. Finally, she muttered, "You've changed," and walked away. But she was wrong. I hadn't changed. I had simply stopped letting her indifference define me. And for the first time in a long time, she was the one who didn't know what to do with the silence. If confrontation had left her unsettled, my calm detachment afterward broke something deeper. It wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no tears flooding the floor. It was subtler than that, but more telling. The first sign was her sudden availability. For years, she had been too tired, too stressed, or not in the mood. Now, she started appearing beside me in bed earlier, brushing up against me like it was an accident, or slipping a hand onto my arm as if to test whether I'd react. I didn't. I lay still, eyes closed, letting the silence answer for me. Then came the hovering. She lingered in doorways, shadowed me into the kitchen, asked questions about things she'd never cared about before. What are you working on? Who texted you? Why are you going out? The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of indifference, she was suddenly desperate to reel me back in. And then came the panic. I saw it in her eyes one night at dinner when I didn't bother asking about her day. She tried to tell me about some trivial work story anyway, but when she noticed my blank nod, her voice cracked. She was realizing what she had never considered possible. I was done. Not angry, not bitter, not scheming, just gone. She tried to bait me with emotion, pushing buttons she knew from old fights. You're being cold. You don't care about this marriage. But I didn't bite. I calmly finished my meal, stood up, and said, I care enough not to beg anymore. That line landed like a stone between us. I watched her flinch, the panic flashing across her face, because she knew, deep down, that I meant it. For years, I had been the man who kept reaching out, the man who begged for closeness, who fought for scraps of affection. Now, I was the man who no longer needed her validation to breathe, and that scared her more than anything else. There's a moment in every broken relationship where you stop debating whether to leave, and you simply know. For me, it wasn't one grand betrayal or explosive fight. It was the slow death of 1,000 rejections, years of indifference piled one on top of the other. By the time I reached my decision, the weight of it felt strangely light. I packed a small bag on a Tuesday evening. No dramatic gestures, no shouting across the house. Just the essentials, a few changes of clothes, my laptop, my toothbrush. I had already arranged to stay at a friend's spare room while I figured out something more permanent. When she saw the bag by the door, her face fell. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice cracking, as though she hadn't been the one to push me here with years of coldness. I looked at her, not with anger, not with hatred, but with the clarity of a man who had finally accepted the truth. I'm leaving with what's left of my dignity. Her eyes welled with tears. She took a step toward me, but stopped short, like she didn't know how to bridge the distance she had created. "We can fix this," she whispered. And maybe she believed that in the moment, but I didn't, because fixing something requires both people showing up, and I had been the only one showing up for far too long. I picked up my bag and walked out the door. The night air felt cool against my skin, like a baptism. It wasn't triumph I felt, and it wasn't bitterness. It was freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by rejection, by the quiet humiliation of begging for love that should have been freely given. And as the door shut behind me, I realized that walking away wasn't the end. It was the beginning of finally choosing myself. It's been months since I closed that door, and sometimes I still catch myself replaying the little moments, the 1,000 tiny cuts that bled our marriage dry, her constant rejections, the way her eyes lit up at her phone instead of me, the silence that settled between us like dust on forgotten furniture. But I don't look back with bitterness anymore. I look back with clarity. What I learned is simple, but it came at a heavy cost. Respect starts with yourself. If you let someone dismiss you long enough, if you bend so far to keep peace that you break your own back, eventually they stop seeing you as a partner. They start seeing you as furniture, always there, always useful, always silent. I let that happen to me. I thought love meant patience, persistence, and unconditional giving. And yes, love is those things, but only when it flows both ways. Otherwise, it's not love, it's servitude. The day I stopped begging wasn't the day my marriage ended. It was the day I reclaimed myself. I learned that silence can be stronger than arguments, that distance can speak louder than words, and that walking away with dignity is worth more than staying with someone who doesn't see your worth. Do I regret the years I spent trying? Sometimes. But those years taught me exactly what I will never accept again. They taught me how dangerous it is to lose yourself in someone else's indifference. So if there's a lesson in all this, it's this: never hand over your self-respect for the sake of being loved, because the right person won't ask you to, and the wrong one won't appreciate it until it's too late.